Simon Sinek doesn't like the concept of work-life balance. Elizabeth says the purpose of posting things on social media is to get attention. And Thomas Frank posted 3 videos in under a week. Want to know what is going on? Well, let's talk about what has happened in the world of human performance, productivity, and philosophy. Mayuko and Cole both reminded us that no one has their lives together and we should focus on living it. And Mark Manson tweeted something that could help us with doing that. A good definition of success is when the problems in your life are the problems you are happy to have. Now that is certainly not easy and there are so many definitions of success, but Stephen brought something up in his email sequence about the flow state, helping us get over a bit of procrastination, and said having a 6 out of 10 day is a hell of a lot better than throwing the towel in entirely. Now, you are probably familiar with the flow state, and Tom spoke about it a bit in his Q&A this week, also mentioning every job has overhead, those things you don't really want to do but need to do, and his advice? To just get started. Something interesting he did bring up was about our brain, our memory. He spoke about myelination, which helped me learn that during adolescence we actually actively get rid of things from our own brain. A process known as pruning removes unneeded neurons, so the saying use it or lose it is even more impactful in our adolescent years than I even thought. On the other hand, myelination, what Tom was talking about, is the process of creating connections for quicker use later on, and has been shown to increase performance up to 3,000 times, which is understandable considering that is basically what learning is. Speaking of learning, Ali is talking to us again about being lazy, but learning how to learn with desirable difficulty. Basically enough to challenge us, but not too much to mentally drain us, and suggests not to learn from gurus, but from someone just ahead of you. Now, on the Talent Equation podcast episode, Stuart talks to Sky about pedagogy and andragogy, how children and adults learn, and they bring up the expertise reversal effect, which Ali sort of mentions, which is where the effectiveness of instruction can decrease when there is a larger gap in prior knowledge between the teacher and learner. Now, the questions you ask when learning obviously play a role, and Dan Abrahams made an interesting comment about convergent and divergent questions, saying convergent questions is to draw a specific answer out of the learner, and divergent questions helping them find their own answer. I don't know about you, but there is so much I want to learn and so many questions I want answers for that's hard to know what to focus on, which Mark Manson brought up in his newsletter asking that exact question: expert or jack of all trades? To which he said, be a good all-round person who is insanely good at one thing. Kind of a get out in my opinion, but that's just me. Professor Feynman did tweet something that is very pertinent to this theme of learning, saying grades aren't as valuable as skills, and understanding is more important than memorization, which I brought up in my recent video on note-taking. Similarly, on a Patreon post from Andy, he had an image in it. Now, the post was around tools for thought, with some great insights, but this image shouldn't be left out of this recap. And speaking of learning, this diagram shows there is so much behind high performance to not only get there, but maintain it, with an interesting comment from Michael to Dan on the Sports Psych Show podcast talking about an invisible handshake or invisible agreement in high performance, where if you don't perform, you're gone, and the episode speaks on the mental skills training involved in dealing with that. Sticking with the sport theme a little bit, Sky and Stuart in their discussion brought up self-fulfilling prophecy in youth sport performance and the relative age effect, alongside the Pygmalion effect, Galatea effect, and Matthew effect, and discussed how they all play a role, but they are connected, Pygmalion and Galatea effect, to achieving goals outside of sport, looking at our expectations and outside expectations affecting our own performance in life and business. Which of course James Clear in his newsletter had this to say about expectations. Starting from 0 can be a gift. If you don't have much to begin with, you don't have much to lose. You can be bold when you aren't trying to protect something. But speaking of much to lose, Natalie shared an honest truth about creator success and how that invisible handshake, invisible agreement you make in high performance can put unwanted stress and anxiety on what you should and should not do. Talking about walking on eggshells with what she can do and say due to outside perceptions and expectations. Cole, on the other hand, had an interesting perspective into this as he shared his story of 4 years documenting his story and said talking on camera helped his communication skills and actually got rid of his anxiety, increasing his self-awareness. So it seems it depends on the creator how the fame and influence can affect you. Elizabeth, on the other hand, made a bold but justified statement that everyone posting on social media is just looking for attention. Now, this was directed at Instagram, and she does explain her thoughts, but as a previous article from Mark Manson goes over, social media isn't the problem. Something that Eliasson brought up in his newsletter was it's usually easy to see what's so great about someone else's situation, but it's hard to see the not so good parts. And a quote he included says, "Everyone's dealing with problems they don't advertise, at least until you get to know them well." Which I think is what Elizabeth was getting at, which she alludes to in another video of hers about what she doesn't like about productivity, reminding us that many big creators have teams behind them. And just like Morgan said, most of us see a fraction of what happens, so don't overvalue people that are supposedly extraordinary. Now, our attention is the target of everyone and everything nowadays, and attention regulation was spoken about by How to ADHD, using a computer example to explain working memory. And that focus takes effort not only to concentrate on what is important, but, as Stephen Coulter also mentioned this week, effort to resist the urge of spontaneous behavior, or in this case, spontaneous thinking. Now, this could be summarized by saying, don't get distracted, but a term from Darren, the elusive obvious, is a nice way of saying just because it's obvious doesn't mean it is easy. And Nathaniel tried to test that by experimenting with Maya Angelou's routine, which resulted in some nice focused work time and some mental clarity, which we all know he's looking for. Tiago Forte on the attention wagon said that attention disassociation is the biggest thing correlated with unhappiness. Basically, that people that were not present in what they were doing were more likely to be unhappy, which was cited and has been supported. Something Gary Vee brought up when he was talking with Danny is that affirmations from others lead to unhappiness, which is why he points the thumb at himself first when there is an issue. Now, with happiness on the brain, work-life balance springs to mind, but for Simon, he just doesn't like the concept, saying that balance means there are two opposing forces, but work and life should not be opposing. So it's not a balance of work and life, but when and where to put the effort in to each activity. Now, Adam Grant tweeted about not the 4-hour work week, but the 4-day work week, which was also brought up by Joe, bringing up plenty of positives, but they recognise the limitations, like some people that are on low wages want more hours, not less, which Seth Godin touches on when he speaks about errors being predictable. We can prevent lots of errors, but it is a question of what it costs to avoid them and where to put that effort. Now, finding a balance is never easy, and work and rest is another balancing concept Simon may agree with, but Mike and Matty spoke about rest, talking about light sleep for learning, REM sleep for making connections, and deep sleep for long-term memory. Michael also, of course, talking about sleep as the sleep doctor, saying that magnolia bark can actually improve sleep, which was interesting. Answers in Progress also followed this trend of talking about memory and learning, and said that long-term memory makes the links with the environment actually forming the working memory that is used to make us sound smart or not, depending on what you can remember, but it is reliant on getting enough rest for the information to be stored. But how do you get the rest? Well, Stephen brought up some interesting tips for recovery. Ice baths, foam rolling, massage, saunas, yoga, and nature immersion. And then the golden rule of sleep. To spend 9 hours in bed if you want 8 hours of sleep. Not going to say too much, but 8 hours? It depends. But that goes along with Ali's strategy of strategic laziness. So, success and expertise were mentioned earlier, and goals are often tied to them. Seth spoke about it a few times in the blog, saying luck is a strategy, not necessarily a good one, but setting yourself up to be lucky might be helpful. Also saying that typing a book takes a few days at most. It is figuring out what to type that might take years. just reminding us to play the long game with knowledge and learning. Speaking of the long game, Thomas Frank has been playing the long game on YouTube for a while, and he has had a few fights with Beeminder to help him wake up early, publish on the blog, and publish videos, and he's at it again, this time posting 3 videos in a week, which could be following Captain Sinbad with his recent rise in quantity, but one of those videos from Thomas was about 5 levels of accountability. Obviously, self-accountability, then partner accountability. For him, I think Beeminder is that partner. Then coach or teacher, a team, and finally leadership. But as he says, and Stephen also mentions, giving a voice to an aim, a goal, can actually reduce the chance of achieving it due to social reality, as it gives you a sense of completion, which is why those levels of accountability are so important. Accountability hopefully will lead to consistency, but Joey from Better Ideas seems to be in a consistent slump and talks about thinking in new ways with a quote, "We don't think ourselves into new ways of living, we live ourselves into new ways of thinking." And once again, James Clear comes up in the newsletter with something to echo this point by saying, "Faced with the choice between changing one's mind and proving that there is no need to do so, almost everyone gets busy on the proof," which Erin also goes over, bringing up the idea of false impression of change, doing small things to almost fool ourselves we have actually made a change, but we are actually playing safe, and that we should make more mistakes and experiment with new things. Within reason, of course, because it always depends, just like Peter McKinnon's answer to whether cinema cameras are needed in 2021. Come on, it depends is a bit of a get-out. Or is it? Getting out as much value from what you have is what Slice of Light was talking about in minimalism, and that decluttering is only a small section. It is valuing what you have and controlling those emotions of wanting to buy or consume more that matters, which was actually spoken about by How to ADHD. Emotional dysregulation, and how some people have emotions that are just out of proportion in some situations, and the potential solution: accept you have emotions, forget any judgments, and get specific about what emotion it actually is by using an emotion wheel. Get curious. Not furious, as Seth Godin said, they may rhyme, but one is more productive than the other. Now that I'm sure you've taken notes on all of those little highlighted points, get off YouTube and do something productive with your time instead.